Hello, everybody. I'm Rosemary Coates in Silicon Valley. I'm your host for this edition of the Frictionless Supply Chain podcast. I'm the executive director of the Reshoring Institute, where we help companies bring back or expand their manufacturing in the US and now also in Mexico. I'm a contributing writer to Supply Chain Management Review. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome back my friend, Rebecca Fannin. She's a journalist and has been writing about technology first in Asia and then in the Heartland of America. Rebecca has recently published a brand new book. I think she's published 4 or 5 so far, but this one is called The New Tech Titans of China, about the shift in investment and technology development in China over the last few years. And I think it's so important that we learn about this topic. For supply chain professionals, it's important because so many companies are shifting production, some production at least, out of China, but
Mhm.
still sourcing and some manufacturing it there. And so we need to understand the bigger picture about what's happening in China. So let's get started. Welcome back to the podcast, Rebecca.
Oh, thanks, Rosemary. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. So you've written now 5 or 6 books about the rise of technology in Asia and in the heartland of America. Are you considered, well, you are considered the expert in reporting on technology trends, but what prompted you to return to Asia after you wrote about the technology rise in the heartland of America?
Well, I think we have to go back a few years. Silicon Dragon was published in 2008, my first book. Then Startup Asia a few years later, which included India and other parts of Asia that were emerging. And then I wrote The Tech Titans of China in 2019. And this came out right before COVID. So that's not a great time for a book launch. And then a lot of things happened over the past 5 years in China and US technology, and the fast pace of AI and robotics and data centers. It really needed an update. So this update just published, and it went international as well. So I'll be doing a book tour in London, and we did a book tour already in Silicon Valley, New York, and Austin, and some other hubs. So it's been good going, and I think it really just needed an update. It needed a refresh. It's a complete rewrite, by the way, a complete update.
Yeah, it's different from your other books that were more just reporting out. I know you were a journalist for various newspapers in the past. And your other books were very, I think, sort of focused on reporting what was happening and kind of a journalistic style. This one has more commentary in it, and it's really, really interesting. But so important that we understand what's going on in China. I think we've lost sort of our intimate touch with China as companies have moved away, and we're not going there so much anymore.
Yeah.
But it's such an important player in the global supply chain. What are you seeing in what the new tech titans are doing about this shift in moving manufacturing away from China? Are there new technologies or supply chain technologies or robotics, things that would affect supply chain or manufacturing that have changed recently?
Well, I think the heartland, the US, has become much more aware of the imperative of manufacturing in the United States. And so there's much more of a concerted effort to invest in our homeland and bring back some of those factories that moved to China and elsewhere in Southeast Asia. And I think that's a big shift.
Yeah, I think it's a big shift too, but I also know the statistics don't bear out much of anything coming back. So,
Not yet, not yet. There's a lot of
right.
talk.
So, yeah, the manufacturing job growth has been relatively flat for 2 years. So even though there's a lot of movement, the tariffs and the rhetoric and so forth about manufacturing in America, it's not played out yet. And I think there's perhaps a lot of pent-up demand. that eventually, when the economy stabilizes and we have some better idea about the tariffs. By the way, there's new tariffs coming probably next week, the new 301 tariffs. So we're going to be in that sort of whipsaw situation once again. But I think once that stabilizes, then we will see more investment in the US if we can make the economics work.
Right. Well, so I just got back from a trip to New Albany, Ohio, and New Albany is where the Intel semiconductor plant is going up, and where Meta and Google and Amazon and Microsoft have their data centers. So I can say there's a ton of new investment in data centers. These are from U.S. companies, though. All of them are U.S. companies, but the data center issue certainly is an area to watch, I think, too.
Yeah, for sure. But I think also, a lot of that development is related to the Chips and Science Act,
Yeah.
funded a lot of that kind of development. Speaking of which, what's happening with capital investment now in China? I mean, it was roaring. I mean, just incredibly robust for quite some time. But I think it's slowed down a little bit. There's kind of some hesitation, I think, in investing in China now.
Yeah, well, one thing for sure is that the venture investors from Silicon Valley are not there anymore. And they have left some China staff in place and changed the names of some of their funds. But the key players from Silicon Valley are back in Silicon Valley. This is a larger result of the geopolitical, economic, commercial race between China and the US, and the friction between these two superpowers. That has changed a lot. And what's happening now is the Chinese government has gotten a lot more involved in funding new technologies with
Oh, so competing with venture capitalists for
not
investment?
so much competing with them, but maybe working with them to help fund. The venture investors are the ones who really know how to spot technologies and how to scale it up. The government really, they're not experts at that, but they have funding resources.
Yes, right,
Yeah.
right. Well, I also know you wrote about in your book the 2023 congressional investigation
Oh, yeah.
about the use of venture capital in China and
Yeah.
how venture VCs were investing in the technology race in China and how dangerous that was for America. Oh, do you think that really was the cause of the shift in investment?
It certainly was a large contributing factor. And many of these investment firms scaled way back on China within a year or two, and they have tried to sell off their investments in China as well. It's a slow unraveling process, though. The exodus of the people back to Silicon Valley was not slow, but the unraveling of the funds uh, that's a different situation. That takes time.
Well, so if the government is investing in new technology, the technology rise in China, um, and the VCs are backing out, which just seems kind of weird to me. I mean, I would think venture capitalists, no matter what the geopolitics are interested in making money. So they're going to invest in places where there's possibility. And to see them backing off from China is a kind of a strange message to me. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
I think there were real deep-rooted fears and security risk involved with this. And you don't want to be on the wrong side. So then there are on a more positive note, there are other frontiers out there globally. India is an up and comer. So some have spent more time and attention and money in India, and they've shifted resources to other places like Singapore has become a leading hub.
Singapore, wow, I'm surprised. I mean,
Yeah,
Singapore was the breakthrough region, country for a long time prior to the rise of China, but it got so expensive it became kind of a banking capital. You say they're now investment in technology development there?
Well, the funds are headquartered there. Some of the funds have changed their location, and some of the tech companies have changed their location as well to Singapore to avoid some of the blocks on cross-border technology, innovation, and investment. Singapore became a haven for that. So as we saw with Manus AI, to use a great example of what's been happening, Manus was acquired by Meta and at the end of the year, and then the Chinese government said, well, we don't want the deal to go, if we don't want the founders of this company to leave China, and we don't want this deal. So now that deal is in play right now, whether one of the Chinese tech titans is going to end up taking over this company, Manus AI, which had actually moved to Singapore to avoid this whole situation of the blocks and US and China investment blocks. So this is an ongoing issue. It's going to hit other companies as well, I think, but AI is the big one right now.
Okay. Did you go back and revisit any of the original companies that you wrote about in your 2008 book in China, or what's happening with some of those companies now?
Well, that was an interesting thing, is that when my first book, Silicon Dragon, emerged, was published, it was all about Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and a few others. Well, believe it or not, those companies they're still mighty. They're still very mighty. They're still the leaders. They have changed focus somewhat more to AI, but they are still the leaders in their original areas. Baidu in search, Tencent in gaming and social communications, Alibaba in e-commerce. But they're all getting into these new areas that are booming in China, such as AI and robotics and industrial tech too, enterprise tech.
Yeah, drones and that sort of thing. So
Yeah,
a lot of this is applicable to supply chain people too. I mean, the
it
use of
is.
robotics obviously is intended to drive down costs in a manufacturing environment and to help improve quality as a result of that, extracting the labor out of situations essentially. And so, changes the economic face of it. But yeah, I mean, the development of robotics and the implementation of robotics is certainly a topic of interest.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah, and you're seeing more investment in robotics in China. Well, I think China buys more robots than any place in the world, right?
Yeah, well, probably because of all the factory use of robotics. But don't forget those wonderful humanoid robots as well, the Unitree and the ones that are going to maybe eventually have an impact in the consumer market as well as health aides and companions. And they're amazing. That's amazing to watch. And China is leading in this humanoid robotics area as well.
Yeah, I spoke at CES in Las Vegas in January.
Yeah,
And as I was leaving the conference, there was a group of people crossing the street, and there
yeah.
was a robot with them just walking along like
Oh, really?
one of the gang. Yeah, it was really funny. And the people that were with the robot were sort of not paying attention to it. They were just walking across the street, even though
Oh,
they were obviously with the robot.
oh,
But yeah,
that's
I
funny.
mean, the development in that area, making robots seem more human and having more capabilities is really interesting
It
and fun
is.
and fun to watch as
Yeah,
well.
it's fun. Yeah. Yeah. I saw the boxing robots at CES and everybody was crowded around them.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
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 Well, um, the biggest shift that I think over time that I've seen is that, back in 2008 or 9, China was more of a copier or a follower than an
Yeah.
innovator. But
Yeah.
over the last stretch of 10 or 15 years, they've certainly taken the lead in a lot of areas, like you were saying. I think are we pretty even with China in terms of AI now, do you think, or is China ahead?
Well, it depends. That's I shouldn't say it depends. It's more than that. But in terms of commercial applications, I think China has really pushed AI into many fields and made it commercially viable. In terms of sheer innovation, I think the U.S. has the lead on that. Now, there's a lot of commentary on who's leading on the frontier models. Of course, DeepSeek shook everyone up because it came in as a very efficient model, and it's actually becoming much more widespreadly used. And I think now that caused Silicon Valley to say, hey, wait a minute, I think China can really matter in this AI race. And I think people are now saying, the experts are now saying that China is only just a few months behind the US in terms of the raw innovations behind AI. But I think on the actual commercial use of AI in terms of robotic vehicles and how it's used in factories and electric vehicles, I think China has got the lead on that.
Yeah, I think what I've been reading too is that China's use of AI is a lot to do with its open source development
Oh,
and
yeah. Mhm.
allowing allowing a lot of developers to use the platforms to develop applications. In the US, we have a closed environment. So the
Yeah.
companies that are developing AI are not going to share that with anybody.
Yeah. Well, that is a factor. And China is making the most of that.
Yeah,
As you
right.
saw, I mean, you saw the news yesterday on the Shanghai World AI Conference, where China is also trying to take the lead on safeguards and national security and bringing in other countries within Asia to develop kind of a unified approach to AI. So there again, China, I really think it should be a unified effort internationally.
Yeah.
But here you see China um, uh, putting itself out there as we're going to take the lead on this security and safeguard issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of astonishing because we're not used to that. We're used to always being the leader in the US and always pushing forward. And now we have competition. And I think, in a lot of cases, China, as you said, is ahead, and that's concerning. But yeah, I mean, I've listened to enough of your talks and your guests at your events and so forth to understand that most of the people who are involved in the industry would prefer to see the US and China work together for the bigger benefit of
Right,
humanity than to be competitive. And because
right.
no, you don't want to have winners and losers in this case, and it's possible the US would lose. And so it's, probably a better strategy to be a collaborator and to work for the development with guardrails and policy and ways of
Yeah,
developing together for the benefit of humanity.
yeah, yeah. It's not happening right now.
No, I know. We're adversaries. There's a lot of restrictions, a lot of fear, I think, in Washington also. And fear isn't going to help, right? I mean, AI is going to move forward. We need to, I think, embrace it and understand how we can work together with our global partners in order to develop products and approaches that are better for humanity instead of just an individual country.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But you see a lot of talk about this sovereign AI, right? Country specific AI.
Yeah,
And it really is China and the US. Again, in most of these tech areas, it's China and the US. Uh, and so who could imagine this 2 decades ago
right.
when, I wrote that book, Silicon Dragon, which was about China's Silicon Valley, and nobody believed that. everyone was very skeptical. And then sure enough, hey, wait a minute, a decade later, we see China on the rise and on par with the US in terms of venture capital spending in startups and the whole energy. Now China has fallen somewhat behind on the venture and the startup scene because the economy is not in good shape in China. And so we've seen a slowdown now, but I think not necessarily from the gigantic tech titan companies, the Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent. They're still innovating in new ways and investing a lot. It's huge sums of money, and they're still the titans that they were before, just like our Google, Amazon, Microsoft. They're still in the lead. There hasn't been a real shakeup there, which in doing the update on the book and the whole new research on this new book, that struck me as kind of remarkable that it's still the same leaders, it's still the same companies. They do have some different business models. They have some, and there's also the aspect that they have retrenched somewhat from a global standpoint. They have not been as expansionary as they were before, particularly in the Western world. They've been much more focused on what they call the global South, which is the area, of Southeast Asia and surrounding countries. And that's what this new AI strategy is all about too. It's China and the global South. So that was also another big change, I think.
Yeah, a lot of change for sure.
Yeah,
It's really interesting from, our audience is supply chain people. And so I think,
yeah,
from our perspective, it's really interesting that we follow what's happening in technology because it's going to create a pathway for where we source and manufacture around the world. And I think the more technology that's out there, the more attractive these places look, and hopefully the more economically stable they become.
yeah. It's also about the infrastructure too. The whole idea, and so China again has an incredible infrastructure of the rails and all the new airports and seaports in the United States. Well, all you can do is drive around in the heartland and
Yeah.
or any major city outside of the central city, and you'll be. I don't know how many people actually do that. I don't know how many people actually really
Yeah,
see.
it's astonishing when you go to China and you see, an 8-lane highway in both directions, and it's all smooth and beautiful and
Yeah,
fast, and and then you come back to the US and you're hitting potholes and bumpy roads,
yeah,
on our highways and our freeways, and
yeah,
yeah, I mean it's really remarkable when you look at the difference. We have done a poor job of keeping up our infrastructure, but then of
yeah,
course, China has the benefit too of new investment over the last 20 years too. I mean, all this stuff is pretty new.
yeah,
Their infrastructure is all pretty new. So, and we're dealing with 1950s infrastructure. So,
yeah. Yes, that's right.
yeah,
I think
we have
even
an opportunity for massive investment, I think, in infrastructure, which is again very related to supply chain. I mean, you have to have ports and bridges and roads and uh, technology infrastructure and so forth in order to operate these days. And without that, or if it's old fashioned or crippled or whatever, supply chain is going to be held back.
right, right. Well, what are you seeing today and how companies are adapting their China strategy and outsourcing, reshoring? What are you seeing?
Yes, well, we're definitely seeing companies that are very interested in leaving China. I think because of the rhetoric, the tariffs,
Mhm.
the geopolitical fighting, the risk management, all these things are contributing to companies rethinking their strategies. So a
Mhm.
lot of companies, most of the companies we interview or talk with are interested in leaving China, but
Yeah.
not necessarily coming back to the US. It's
Ah,
still too expensive here to compete in a lot of ways. Now, with the introduction of robotics and other automation,
Mhm.
it's a little easier to make that case. But what we're seeing is companies, there's definitely a shift away from China. And where they're going is places like India and Mexico in
Mexico.
particular. A lot of investment in Mexico.
Okay.
Now we've got USMCA, which is about to be renegotiated or is renegotiated right now. They're in talks right now. And if we don't sign up for USMCA, I think we'll see another shift because a lot of companies that are manufacturing in Mexico are taking advantage of the free trade agreement between the US
Mhm.
and Canada and Mexico.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
if we don't go forward with that, it's going to cause yet another shift. And then, of course, all the wars. The war in Iran affects a lot of manufacturing, not just oil prices and gas, but chemicals manufacturing, plastics,
Mhm.
fertilizers, all these things that, they're really affecting those industries. And still the war in Ukraine as well. So there's still a lot of minerals and so forth that are in short supply because of that war. So wow, the geopolitics have had an effect like we've never seen before, but part of that is because our supply chains are very global these
Yeah.
days, and they weren't in the past.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me again. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you or figure out how to get a hold of your book, The New Tech Titans of China, how do they get a hold of you or where do they go to order the book?
Okay. Well, of course, the books are on Amazon
Yeah.
and your favorite bookstore, I hope.
Yeah.
And then silicondragonventures.com is my website. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And I think LinkedIn is great for business connections. And yeah, my email, uh, look up silicondragonventures.com and add Rebecca to it in the beginning, and you'll have a good start on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. And you can listen to more supply chain podcasts, the Frictionless Supply Chain, on Supply Chain Management Review's landing page, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can reach me, Rosemary Coates, at rcoates@reshoringinstitute.org and visit our brand new website, which is www.reshoringinstitute.org, where we publish all of our research on manufacturing in Mexico and in the US. So
Very good.
thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rosemary. Take care. Bye bye.